Hey guys, so let me tell you a story. I think when I first started Microsoft about almost 3 years ago, um, I actually didn't think Microsoft was a security vendor. It was interesting, but when I started doing my research and I started looking at the products and I started looking at what Microsoft was trying to achieve, I started thinking, you know what? If they do this right, this is big because now the company that usually has focused on productivity is now incorporating security into the products they make. Now the the provider is also trying to protect their assets, right? Um, who better to protect it than the people to make it, right? Um, Let me ask you this: on Windows 10, how many of you actually use another antivirus? A majority of you probably use Windows Defender. And you know what? Windows Defender doesn't even have everything enabled. You're just leveraging the cloud protection. You don't even have all the knobs turned on. We don't want to turn on those knobs because we might inhibit productivity. We might make stuff not work, and then you'll be complaining that apps are not working, right? So it's that sort of lever of just like balance of productivity and security. All right, so I'm going to show you some diagrams. They're animated, okay? So you'll enjoy them, and hopefully by the end you'll get a better picture of why Microsoft's doing so well, and um, maybe you might just understand that the possible gaps in your security posture, maybe your strategy, and try to incorporate it, whether with Microsoft or whether with another organization. I just want to educate you on what's possible, what's out there, what you can achieve. All right. So let's talk about phishing emails. This is this is the main this is the main point. This is the main attack surface adversaries are going to try to attack your organization. Is a phishing email, internal or external? An adversary is going to try to get a email into your organization, right? Now, you may protect it with your external email provider or your vendor. That's protecting it from the external point of view, but if that if a file or email, or if they're using a personal email, whatever, if they open something on the endpoint, you're still compromised. You're still breached. If they and if they breach that endpoint, then technically they could send internal to internal emails, and then now it doesn't actually go outbound and use your MX records, right? Also, or actually, unless you have some kind of on-premise mechanism and route that mail flow for outgoing traffic, right? Which is going to be some work in itself. Um, but most of the time, most of us don't have that level of protection when it comes to internal protection, right? So the example is, let's say an adversary gets access to your resources by sending a phishing email, internal or external. How do you clean it? So the adversary sends that attachment. What are we going to do? We're also going to First we're going to delete it, right? That's normal. But we're also going to scan any other emails that match that bad attachment and automatically remove it. We're also going to share that telemetry with the intelligent security graph and feed that telemetry so that Defender for Endpoint can start remediating its infected machines that match that bad hash. On top of that, we're going to share that telemetry with SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams, and we start blocking it there. All this happens. Some might happen faster than other, but eventually they all automatically start remediating against it, right? So what does that look like, right? So here's an example. You get an email, right? ATP scan is in progress, meaning we're inspecting the email and you don't have access to the file till it's done being inspected. Once it's done being inspected, we will quarantine that email and then um, remove the email and just quarantine it. On the right side though, that is going to be the security analyst view. You don't actually have to look at it because it's being remediated, but I'm just giving you visibility onto the view of what the analyst would see. Office 365 will scan the attachment residing in other inboxes, right? Start remediating those other inboxes. Now that intelligence is shared, and then in OneDrive, because we know about that bad hash, You no longer can download that file from OneDrive. It's the same thing for SharePoint. You no longer can download it if it matches that bad hash. What you're going to have to do is just go revert to a prior version to get access to your file back. Now, what happens next? Well, Defender for Endpoint. That telemetry is shared. Defender for Endpoint, our EDR, is going to scan any attachments within your organization to see if any endpoints are matching that hash. Then we start seeing if that endpoint talks to any bad IOCs, any bad IPs, any bad domains. Now we've got a hash, we've got IPs, we got domains, and then we start doing some reconnaissance, right? All this happens automatically. And then the user, that machine he's on, he'll get a message saying something has been protected or something has been cleaned, right? Does that make sense? Here's another example. Let's go the other way, the endpoint. So let's say a user opens up a personal email. How many of you are allowing personal email for your managed endpoints? How many of you allow USBs? If you are, that's an entry point. Whether you want to admit it or not, and you have your protections, that's an entry point, right? And what if that payload is a time bomb payload, like the SolarWinds attack, right? What if it's a time bomb payload that just sits there for 2 weeks? Are you going to be able to catch that? So let's say that happens and we detect that bad file with our EDR and we start automatically remediating it. Great. But let's go ahead and remediate the other endpoints that match that bad hash. Let's share telemetry. On top of that, let's feed it back to Office 365, right? And start remediating it at a company-wide level across any other inboxes. Does that make sense? This happens automatically. This literally happens in about 5 to 10 minutes when I've tested, right? And don't quote me on that, but when I've tested, this is the time of all this happening. The moment we detect that bad IOC, right? So here's another thing. If you are managing the endpoint with Intune, and so there's a configuration policy and there's a compliance policy. Configuration policy is what do you want to configure the device with? Compliance policy is if you don't meet these certain settings on your endpoint, you don't get access. Meaning your firewall better be turned on, Defender better be turned on. I see organizations are using it to do updates, meaning that they'll send out an email and in 1 month they'll say if you don't update, then you won't get access. And it's true because the compliance policy says you need to be on, this build or 1908 or 1903 or whatever the build is. You need to be on this build, and if you're not, you won't get access. So the compliance policy says if a Windows 10 machine tries to log in and it doesn't meet that compliance policy, you don't get access, right? But another setting you do is I expect my machine to be at a medium risk or higher. And if you're not, you won't get access. And I'm going to isolate the endpoint. And I'm going to isolate the user that the endpoint belongs to. And I'm going to isolate any single sign-on application you're trying to connect to. I mean, this is if you don't have this already, this is what you can achieve, right? What does that look like? First, configure compliance policy. Set that level to low, medium, or high, whatever, but I would say medium, or low is just, maybe Tor browser or things like that, right? And once you set your compliance policy, the scenario is, let's say the user opens up a malicious document, and it's on the left side here on the USB drive. He opens that document, Windows Defender ATP detects malicious activity and raises that alarm. So you see the little high alert right there? What happens? The user can no longer access his data. The user can no longer access corporate data. If you have files that are AIP encrypted, he can't open those files. If you have, and on the right side, that's the automation kicking in. So and I'll explain that later on. But really, that's just the automation kicking in and doing reconnaissance, trying to find out if any other IOCs are matching on other endpoints, trying to collect everything for you before it starts remediating, right? But the user does have access to still browse for the duration. He just can't touch corporate data, right? And once it's been remediated and everything's cleared, the user gets access to Office, right? This works. This happens. I actually have a few organizations that are just they're following what I'm prescribing. They're using the products and turning on what they need to turn on, and they are having a good experience. You just have to see it to believe it. Let's see. Here's another thing you're going to get. So, okay, let's talk about data. Who has better data than Microsoft? Because, I mean, just admit it. We're monitoring all the machines that are just Windows 10 machines that have Defender. We're monitoring now our corporate enterprise customers. We're monitoring Bing traffic. We're monitoring Xbox traffic. And we have the Outlook email traffic, right? We have so much data that and we still share it with everyone. But if there's a 0-day campaign that has never been seen before, we got you, right? Because this service, the advanced threat hunters, imagine them as an extension of your team. Imagine them as someone that is going to help you out, and they're just sort of the reactive response. And what I mean by that is, let's say there's a 0-day campaign that has never been seen before. All we kind of have are just like IOCs and indicators, but maybe there's no executive summary. Maybe it's not really out there yet in the wild, and people posting about it yet. Maybe it's surfacing a little bit. But let's say it's a new campaign never been seen before, but we have IOCs, and you are opting in to share your data. So you have to opt in, and then you have to share your data, and we will scrub all private data. All we need is the file hashes, we need the IPs, we need the domains. But once we have that, you give us access. If an organization is going under an attack and you opted in, we will see if any other organizations that have opted in are going to be attacked as well. Are they being attacked by the same thing? And if you are and you opted in, we'll send you an email, right? So we're going to alert you, and then we're going to raise that alert, and then your threat hunting team will respond, right? That'll look like something like this, where it's an email, and it'll be sort of a red badged alert that you'll see in the Defender. MCAS, Cloud App Security. You may be wanting to do feature for feature comparison, right? Or with your other CASB tools, but we are taking it a different way because we're thinking about this vision and the features that are going to help achieve this level of protection we want might not align with this feature for feature comparison. So don't always do feature for feature comparison. Think about the outcomes. Think about, if I pull out this piece, this best of breed piece, and I put in this Microsoft piece, am I going to be in a better security posture? Am I going to get even more than I had before, right? I might lose this little thing, but I might gain this all these other components. It's like you're getting rid of LeBron James, but you're getting 3 really good players that helps your overall defense, right? You really like LeBron, but at the end of the day, you've got to make a decision. And this decision is to secure your organization, right? Improve your overall defense. So for Cloud App Security, how do you know what third-party storage people are using? How do you know what people are accessing? How do you know what websites they're visiting, right? That's CASB, right? And here's the cool thing. If you have Microsoft Defender for Endpoint, you don't need another agent. It has the telemetry, it just shares it to CASB. It has the telemetry, it just shares it to Endpoint DLP for compliance protection and data protection. So let's say a security admin notices that some users with no OneDrive usage or no traffic on OneDrive, he's like, oh, why are these users not using OneDrive? Maybe they're using something else. Literally, I'll tell you right now, my wife, I can't get her to use anything, anything, and she just keeps using Google Drive, right, on her home personal stuff. She doesn't want to use OneDrive, so that's fine, right? But it's not fine for corporate use because you're going to have personal data or sensitive data. You don't want it in those repositories. So let's say you see a lot of usage in these other drives. Do you have protections around that, right? By you blocking a site on MCAS, it pushes that policy to Endpoint DLP, and then those unapproved sites are blocked. It's just a firewall rule. Simple as that. User identity risk score. Imagine a credit score. I don't like to say credit score, but I'm going to say credit score. Imagine a credit score for every single user in your organization. How do you build a user score for every single user in your organization, right? And the higher score is not good. The higher score, that means you've been accumulating these suspicious behaviors. Just point here, a point here, a point here. How do you catch that, right? So every single user is going to have a score, and then mass download or copying to USB or sharing to an external party or putting an outbound forwarded policy mailbox rule to forward your email to your personal Gmail account, right? Many different ways, but at the end of the day, now you have not an alert, it's a more correlated data, and it's about a risk posture of a user, right? Of an entity. So, think about that. Here's another thing. When you're making your journey to the cloud, you still have on-premise data center applications, right? And if you do, think about how are you going to secure and expose an on-premise app out to the internet? The best way, or one option, it's not the best, or it's just another option, but one way is to have a app proxy, right? An application proxy that you would install in your on-premise environment that would be that checkpoint. And then you can apply your MFA, your checks, and then you can literally have a even HTTP app on the backside because it's being protected by the app proxy, and the app proxy is what they're accessing. Okay, so a user wants to access maybe a legacy app on premise. He is on an unmanaged machine. He goes to Azure AD. It checks the conditional access policy. It says you are not on a managed machine. The user tries to access the web app, and then the user is blocked from copying or downloading that sensitive data. If he's on a managed machine, then maybe you give him access to download that data because it's managed. You trust the device, right? Zero trust. You trust the device. You trust the user, MFA. You trust the device, okay? What does that look like? Well, let's say he goes to whatever the website is, and then he has to visit a Azure AD sign-on page. He doesn't get access to the actual app. This is the proxy. You have to authenticate properly with MFA before you get access to the app that resides on the back end. Once he signs in with his corporate credentials, then he gets this monitoring page. So we will notify the user and let them know, hey, you're in this proxy session, and we're going to be monitoring you. Also, the URL changes, so that URL turns into a URL that we are hosting. So the user tries to copy sensitive data into the browser session, and he's actually blocked from that activity. And this is the pop-up you get. It says, no, you can't copy or paste because it has sensitive data. So we actually do real-time content inspection based off sensitive data. We can do real-time content inspection based off even regular expressions or search strings that you want us to search for, right? Real-time. And this also works for Endpoint DLP. So then the user tries to copy this, tries to download it, but is also blocked because if we see any sensitive data, we just block that file. Simple as that. The admin discovers that this possible activity was trying to copy some sensitive data onto to an unmanaged machine. So an alert is triggered, right? And then it triggers that score as we talked about, right? That's the score of accumulating points based off your behavior, right? All right, guys, stay with me because this is the really good thing. Endpoint DLP, protecting your data on these machines that you no longer are in your network perimeter, right? How do you do that? Well, check this out. So I basically, let's say it's a endpoint, and this scenario is the bad actor is just maybe via PowerShell. I'm using PowerShell, but it could be whatever method. He wants to make a malicious file, right? He wants to make a bad file to get into your organization. So he's going to generate some kind of payload. I'm using Lucky Strike. It's a known tool, and he embeds a rat. He embeds the modules. He does credential harvesting, whatever, soundbar enumeration, whatever it is. He has these embedded payloads, and I'm putting all this into a macro, right, into Excel. I actually did a test with my coworkers, and I sent them a embedded macro, and about about like 80% clicked on it. It just clicked yes. You know that yellow button that says, "Do you want to enable macros?" They just click on it. Just automatic behavior. I'm sure you agree. So I'm going to send this email. I'm not going to actually use a Outlook browser, or client. I'm going to just do it with PowerShell. This is what adversaries do. This is what bad actors are doing. They don't use GUIs and stuff like that. It's all command line, right? So they send this bad file, right? They send this bad file. Okay. Let me go to my other video. So they send this bad file, and the guy opens it. The guy opens up the email, and what happens? Well, it's coming from an internal employee. So this is maybe it's an internal email. Maybe he's spoofing, but he opens up the email, right? And just so you know it worked, I opened up Calculator. On the back end, it launched all these other payloads on the endpoint. Okay, so now he opens up that file, right? It's executed, and what happens, right? So basically, the bad actor gets an email, right? And it says, hey, maybe a rat's installed, like maybe a little notification email. Whatever method, he sets up a way to get notified. It could be even a REST API call or whatever, but he gets notified. So then he just tries to log in with those credentials, right? Just to see if he can log in. This is logging in from another IP address, but trying to log in to see if he could possibly log in with the credentials, right? So he logs in, MFA doesn't work, right? He's like, oh, well. So then he's like, okay, he has a random device, so he just remotes into the device, and he tries to access office.com or tries to do some form of reconnaissance on the endpoint, right? And then from there, he then tries to maybe download some sensitive files or whatever on the endpoint. Maybe he finds a file. So just for this example, now what do you see here? We see it being protected by app proxy, right? Real-time content inspection, okay? And then from here, maybe just, for this example, we're just going to download some random file here. And when he downloads it, right, he gets a file and tries to upload it, right? So he goes to box.com. Again, MCAS policy blocks it on the endpoint, meaning you're not allowed to go to this site, So then he's like, okay, well, I can't use a website. Let me try another browser. Let me just try another browser. Right? Maybe it's this browser, right? Let me just try another browser or something else on this managed endpoint. So maybe he tries to use Firefox, or maybe it's the user, right, trying to use it, whatever. But he tries to upload this file using Firefox and using Gmail. He creates a file, and from there tries to add that file and attach a sensitive file. DLP, again, does that content inspection and tries to attach it, won't work. It won't work because if it's classified and it's already labeled, you get a pop-up and you're not allowed to do it. Now you have two options. You can either just block it, or you can give the user the ability to override it if you want to do that. Okay. So now, all right. So he's like, okay, let me try to use his own. I'm gonna try to use this guy's email in his organization to send the file to myself. Right. DLP policy: you can't send sensitive files to external parties. We're gonna block that. Simple as that. Okay. Now he tries to send it out, and we'll scan it, and it's blocked. He's not allowed to do it. Doesn't have permissions. Okay. So now it comes to espionage. So this may be this is kind of a scenario, but I'm just making it up, right? And let's say the adversary just maybe does some form of espionage on the user, right? Or tries to make the user do things for him. It does happen sometimes, okay? And he says, "Hello, Vic," right? And the guy's like, "Hello, who's this?" And the adversary says, wait for it, "Check your laptop." And then maybe there's he's already compromised the laptop, stolen some pictures, whatever, but he's trying to make the user do something for him, right? Whether it's making a bank wire, or whether it's copying files, confidential files, or particular IP, he's trying to make the user do something. Or the user may voluntarily do it if you pay him enough money, right? In either case, you need to catch these sort of insider risk, right? I believe it's a very high percentage, like 65, 70% is going to a lot of these attacks are insider threats, right? So in this example, he's forcing the guy to download a file to USB thumb drive and then ship it to him. You could just use a residential, like a real estate, or something a house being sold. Sometimes they use those addresses, right? There's many different ways to try to ship a USB and not get, and not to your own address, right? All right, so now this user is going to download all these files, right? And then when he downloads all these files, he's going to try to copy it to a USB drive, right? Again, we're doing real-time content inspection, so you're allowed to copy any personal files and stuff you do at home, whatever, that's fine. But the moment we see sensitive files trying to be copied to USB, we're going to block that, right? So now you're not inhibiting productivity, you're just protecting your data, right? And on top of that, remember, all these files are, if it's sensitive data, maybe you have it AIP encrypted, and we'll protect that as well, right? So again, you get a pop-up for that. And all right, guys, so hopefully this gives you a better idea of what we're trying to achieve. Again, Best of Breed was great at its time, and it was a traditional approach, but you must admit the adversaries are evolving. They are getting smarter. They are getting faster. They're scaling out. It's a chess battle, and unfortunately, you have less pieces, and they have as much time as they want. You've seen with some of these attacks, they have as much time as they want to do that reconnaissance and figure things out. When they do attack and light those alerts, you have to go fast, and you have to play blitz, and they have as much time as they want, and you have less pieces, but you do have home team advantage. That's the thing. You need data. You need to know where these guys are. You need to funnel them in a spot, right? You need to have tripwires, landmines. You need to control them. They need to play on your home turf, and you can't be scared. You can't, when you get compromised. What's funny also is when there's two of us when it comes to insecurity. People that have been compromised and people that haven't been compromised. and I'm on the part that has been compromised. I've been breached. And when you're in that bucket of people, it's a sucky feeling. You can't explain that feeling. It's a sinking feeling. It's like you lost your wallet, kind of, or you lost your kid, or your house alarm goes off and you're sleeping and you don't know why it went off. It's like it's a worse feeling to have. And people that get been breached, um, you don't forget it, and you definitely learn a lot. Like you must admit that there is no other experience than getting breached. Um, you can't even there's no you can't even teach that. And that's why I think I find it funny if that if a CISO is doing his best job, why let him go? Because you were breached. He literally is doing the best he can sometimes with what he has, um, with the information he has. But when you get breached, you learn a lot that you won't make those mistakes again. If you're really good, if you're a really good leader, right? So I actually, would be like, um, there's some extra, some battle scars, that some experience that he has, to kind of educate others. So it kind of maybe benefits the organization that the CISO goes to, sometimes. So, all right, guys. So, what do you think? I mean, hopefully it gives you a general idea of what Microsoft is trying to do in regards to security. Um, Now you know about these possible protections you can have. Try to find out if you can imitate it or have a similar type of protection with your existing tools, right? At the end of the day, I want you to be protected. Whether it's with us or whether it's with another company, I just want to educate you and give you information on what's possible out there and what you can achieve, and you know start automating your environment more, and start automating your operations, because you're only one person and you can't scale out. And you know adversaries and bad actors have been using bots forever, and you need to start incorporating that as well. You need to elevate yourself to a role of a proactive threat hunter, looking for gaps in your security posture, and um, overseeing the bots and the automation, and letting them do these remediation and these and these reactive responses, right? You also need a lot of data to give you what you need to reduce your overall time of remediation and time of detection, right? I mean, it's a lot of stuff, and when you have a lot of products you're managing, and maybe someone leaves, it's really hard. So, all right, guys. So thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Please like. If you don't, I don't know you like the content. And yeah, stay safe.